Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So everybody is here, or is it open? Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. So we can start. Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Webinar series of the REA-Bridge Africa program, which is today focused on the women and their role in the economic development in Africa. So before we move to the content of the webinar, just a reminder of the usual good practices on video conferences. So you have two languages with simultaneous interpretation in English and in French. So if you want to listen to either French or English, you can use the interpretation button, which is on the down of your screen on the right side, and you choose the language you wish. This webinar will be recorded, which means that you will be able to review the webinar later if you wish, or if you wish to show it to your colleagues. However, you need to agree on the recording, and if you don't want to have your face seen on the screen, of course, you can shut your camera, especially when you speak. Please turn off your video and microphone when you do not speak. However, of course, when you want to ask a question or to make a comment, you can turn on your video and obviously your mic. You can also put your questions in the chat box. And if you want to ask a question, you raise your hand or you put your question in the chat box. Having said that, we will now start with our seminar. So before I switch to the panelists and introduce the panelists, we have just a simple question to ask you before we start. That is, do you think that women are enough present in the economic development projects in Africa? So you have a multiple choice where you can choose. I guess that you have a pop-up which has appeared on your screen, and you can choose one among the 6 answers proposed. So we'll let you 2 or 3 minutes to cast your vote. And after that, we will see what is your opinion on this before we move to the panelists. So I'm not sure, does it work for all of you?
Oui, ça marche. On a déjà 65% de vote.
Oh, great.
On a déjà voté.
Parfait.
We voted already. 65% voted already.
Donc, la majorité des votants a dit que...
So the majority of voters said that women should be more present in the projects. 65%, 4% thinks they are already present enough, and the remaining think that they are present already, but they should be more so, and 4% doesn't know, and 4% think that the gender is not an important matter in this topic. And as I was speaking, the answer is changing a little bit, and the majority thinks that they are present, but there should be more. Can you show the results or not? I think you can if you click on survey or poll at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so poll. Yeah.
So I hope that all of you see the results. So you have just to click on the sondage or surveys on the down of your screen. And so this, this clearly sets the floor for today's discussion. Since apparently most of you, 92%, think that the women have some role or not, but anyway, there is this situation has to be improved. They should play a bigger role in economic development in Africa. Just for your information, we will have now the discussion, the panelists, and the question and answers. And at the end of our webinar, we'll ask the same question to see if your opinion has been moved by today's discussion. Okay, so before we move to the discussion, just a reminder of what the REA-Bridge Africa is for those of you who would not know, so we'll go quickly. This is a project which has been launched and financed launched by the Presidential Council for Africa, who advises the French president on these matters, and it is funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France, implemented by Business France and ANIMA Investment Network during 2021 and 2022. So the idea is to bring together 16 networks of entrepreneurs across Africa in 16 different countries, both French and English speaking, and help them network and do some training, coaching, and twinning between networks. So we can move. So maybe Sarah, if you want to comment on this, because this is more your topic.
Alors, on va revenir sur les prochains.
So yes, we will get to the next meeting after this webinar, but just a little announcement. We are launching the recruiting for the second cohort of mentoring by the diaspora. And so the heads of the REA network have proposed some people ready for internationalization. And we wish to find some mentors willing to accompany these companies internationally, so people who already have an experience in Africa and Europe.
As you may understand, this is one of the key activities of this project. That's to help raise the profile and help some entrepreneurs in these networks to develop, thanks to mentoring, which is organized with mentors, and hence this call for candidates for this mentoring. So one word about this economic development webinar. This is not the first one of these webinars. This is one of among, well, in a series of webinars. The idea is to select topics of interest, like this today's topic, and to propose a discussion around the issue to give you some perspectives to help you go further on the topic. Oui, Sarah.
Oui. Donc, vous avez dû recevoir un message.
You should have received a message that the webinar is recorded. It will be available on the YouTube channel for ANIMA, and also on the REA-Bridge Africa channel, which are easy to find on YouTube and Google.
So now, after this kind of appetizers, we'll move to today's topic. So that's Women at the Center of Economic Development Project in Africa. So today we have 3 speakers. So Sarah, maybe you can move to, yeah, we have 4 speakers. So Sindi and Mzamo from South Africa will introduce herself in a minute. Then Sougrynoma Zaïnatou Soré from Nigeria. We have then Jean-Claude Ngendandumwen. I hope I didn't, I pronounced your name well. Sorry if I misspelled it. And eventually Seynabou Thiam. So today's, so the topic, why is it important? As we see that we have 24% of African women of working age, they are involved in business creation, which is quite big, with 58% of those who are self-employed in Africa are women. So this means that women have already play a strong role in the economy of most African countries. However, the access to finance is difficult. It's probably difficult in general, but especially for women. So this sets the scene for today's discussion. So now I would like to leave the floor to our first speaker. So we will have 4 presentations by the speakers who have been introduced, each one around 10 minutes. So I kindly ask you to try to stay to keep this timing of 10 minutes for each one, because after that we will have the question and answers. We'll open the floor to all participants. So while we have the presentation, you can post questions in the chat box, of course, and otherwise you will be able to ask your questions after we have had these introductory speeches. Zaïnatou, this is to you. So just a quick question to introduce your presentation. Can you tell us about your projects, the project that you are involved in, and why you think that women should benefit these projects? Zaïnatou, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Philippe, for this introduction. Just like you rightly mentioned, I am part of a project funded by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the project is an FSPI, like we say in French, and it is called Support to Women Entrepreneurship in the Agri-Food Sector in Nigeria. The project came about thanks to Dr. Sonia Darak. She's actually online with us now, working as a regional counselor for the Agricultural Regional Counselor at the French Embassy here in Nigeria, and she covers countries around Nigeria as well. She felt the need to bring women at the center of this project because as we look at it, Africa has actually the highest numbers of female entrepreneurship if you're comparing it to the other parts of the world. And yet, when we look at statistics of women owning enterprises in the agri-food sector or even being employed, and that comes even for some of the studies that we have done ourselves in enterprise setting, about less than 20% of women are employees in some of the studies that we've held in enterprises. And so it's very critical, as you can see, for women that are self-employed, and like we say, 58% of women in Africa are self-employed, and you don't see the trace in formal enterprises. We have decided with the FSPI called SWAYAM, in French, Soutien à l'entrepreneuriat féminin dans le secteur agroalimentaire au Nigeria, CEFAM, we decided to go to the women in rural and peri-urban areas and really discuss how to improve their businesses in the agri-food sector. So the SWAYAM project has essentially 2 components when it comes to women empowerment, or 3 components. The first one is to train women in improving their productions and their processing of goods and also the different crops that they are working with. And then the second aspect is to raise a generation of women champions that will then go and train more women in their communities around all the areas related to healthy foods, food standards, food certification, business development, financial literacy, and basic accountancy for businesses, including marketing, of course. And so with these programs, then the third component would be to strengthen the network of the women within these rural and peri-urban areas so that they can really take advantage of any advocacy and any policy that could benefit the women and also bring to their advantage the development of their businesses. Once we started implementing the project, we made sure that we included the political aspect, and we got the buy-in from the governments where we are working in. The SWAYAN project is implemented in Oyo State in Nigeria and in Kaduna State. With that, we were able to train about 300 women in the different states as primary trainees to get the full set of trainings that we've had, like I mentioned, from the processing, certification, health standard, all the way to business marketing, and also how to make a business plan in some aspect of leadership. And then out of the 300 women, we selected 50 community agents, 25 in each, that will then train an additional 1,000 women in their communities. And I have to tell you that we were very, very impressed by the level of engagement, the level of support we received from the state, because that was very intentional to make sure that the women are visible in the state. So there was an economic need, but there was also a political purpose. We were very intentional about making sure that the project got the buy-in from the state so that the women can then be keyed into state projects for women development. And we're already seeing the fruits of that, particularly here in Oyo State, where the state is looking for women that already have officially registered businesses to see how they can support them further. And so that's obviously a project in the pipeline and it's coming up. But essentially also I want to say one thing. It is important that we look at the women in the informal sector because they really contribute highly to the development of their communities and also to take care of their families. But how do we get them in and how do we help them to improve their businesses? This is something that development projects also need to think a little bit more about. And it's essential that it starts with discussion with the women about what they need and not assume that we know what they need. And that was the whole premise of the SWAYAN project. And we did a baseline study at the beginning of the project to really discuss with the women and understand where the gaps are. And we did our training programs based on the studies, the results of that baseline survey. One thing I also want to say is we did our training manuals and also we conducted trainings in the local languages in Yoruba for Oyo State and in Hausa in Kaduna State, so that the women are also very comfortable and can understand and fully grasp all the elements of these trainings so that they can also step it down later on within their communities. I'll stop here for now, as I think my 10 minutes is almost up, but I will be willing to take on more questions concerning the project and also the way we are advocating for the project in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Zaïnatou, for your very interesting presentation and for keeping the time slot. So now we will move from Nigeria and Burkina to Rwanda with Jean-Claude. So maybe Sarah, you can introduce our next speaker.
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour Jean-Claude. Donc, on a également...
Yes, hello. Jean-Claude, we have some questions to you. You work in Rwanda. You have a long experience in this country in the implementation of projects, in support of projects in Rwanda. So the question that we would like to ask you is, have you seen an evolution in the place given to women over the years? And what is the vision of these development projects and their reality on the ground? Zaina has already spoken about the reality on the ground, but could you please share your experience with us? The floor to you. Thanks a lot, Sarah, and hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for your question. It is true indeed that We have observed this evolution slowly but surely in Rwanda and almost everywhere in Africa. We have a society that is characterized by a patriarchal social structure, and relations between men and women are not fair. And this is not just the case for Rwanda. These inequalities haven't been perceived as unfair for a long time. It was just part of social norms. And some people even say that this is what God wants, because men and women are not the same. Because God created man, and the women come from men, and that is why women have to submit to men. So this inequality of treatment between men and women, girl and boy, also result in many sorts of violence against the women and girls. And these inequalities, social and economic inequalities, can be observed in many countries, not just in African countries. These inequalities can be observed in many other countries, and at all levels, at individual level, but also at structural level. If we have a look at the World Bank report, there was a report issued quite recently. This shows that there is inequality, and this inequality can be represented and can be translated into different forms. Women are paid less, lower salary than men, even though they have the same job, they do the same work. Women normally are more numerous. We can find more women in types of jobs that are less paid. And so women are still exploited. Women do not really have a say in decision making. Very often, not even in their household, and they can't even decide how to use the money that they earn from their work. And this is one form of inequality. But some time ago, thanks to the lobbying at national and international level, so some time ago, we started observing a change, a progressive change, because countries are working to fight against these inequalities. For example, we can see some laws, programs, a budget that is allotted to fight against inequalities in order to work in favor of capacity building of women and to enable women to have a say. In Rwanda, just after the genocide in 1994 against Tutsi, with more than 1 million more millions of victims, many women are the boss, we could say, of their households. They have been victims of genocide, so they're widowers, they lost their husbands, or perhaps their husbands are in prison because they committed this genocide. So all these women became the leader of their households. And in Rwanda, a lot of work has been done to promote equal opportunities between men and women, but also to support capacity building for women and to fight against this hostile context for women. In 1995, Rwanda ratified the Beijing Agreement that you know, I'm sure, that is about women's rights. This program was followed by other programs and decisions, such as the setup of a ministry Ministry of Gender and Women Promotion. That is the name of this ministry, in order to promote equal opportunities between men and women. And they work to promote education for girls, and then a law to enable girls to get money and to become heirs, to inherit the resources of their families. And then there was also a law about the management of soil, 50% and 50%. In 2018, during the third General Assembly of United Nations, the president said that Rwanda decided to promote women's right, because it is very much linked to development. So gender has become absolutely key to national development, both in public sector, private sector, but also for civil society. At institutional level, most organizations of civil society had to review legal tools or statutes or the organization of staff, because they were asked to include the gender-related issues and to adapt to the new context in Rwanda. Such organizations implemented the gender policy, this is called the gender policy, to show in detail how the gender issues will have to be implemented at all levels of organizations. At the moment, in almost all the projects that we work on, if there is no justification of the way in which projects can benefit women, well, if there is this gender issue in policy, in projects, there are more chances to get funds. And that is the case at national and international level, because such organizations have started thinking about the role of women at all levels, including in rural areas. Of course, there are many, many needs, and there is still a long way to go. Now, I would like to think about examples. I would have to speak about many examples, but I would just speak about the role played by civil society to strengthen the role of women. For example, I'm going to share an example of women who have a little business, some business between Rwanda and neighborhood countries. There is an organization called Pro-Femme, member of our organization, with more than 10,000 women who sell their goods. They have their little business between Rwanda and Congo. They have created cooperatives, and they are also connected with a microfinance institution in order to have access to microcredits. So they have small businesses, they sell vegetables, fruit, or corn, and other products. So they are together, they work together in cooperatives, and so they can help each other. They learn leadership, but they can also benefit of some form of protection against abuse that they sometimes suffer when they cross borders. Today, they can be identified and recognized by authorities when they cross the borders. Just last year, these women received the trademark East Africa from and about 6 million in our currency were allotted to support them. These cooperatives have already set up factories to produce products that are exported, and they even hired men. Women who would sell fruit now have factories for the production of juice. Those who would sell corn have set up factories for the processing of corn flour. And those who would sell peanuts, now they can even produce peanut butter. And what is even more striking is that all these little small enterprises have already received the trademark to export, the authorization to export their products abroad, and also to sell their products to big supermarkets in Rwanda. Over the next few years, I am going to visit them, to talk to them, to these women, to speak about the impact of all these actions. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jean-Claude. This presentation was really interesting. I have a couple of questions to you, but I will ask you these questions later. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to the third speaker, and then we'll make a short break before the last question. So,
with Sindi Mzamo, very well known from REA-Bridge and very active in our network. So I guess that she has a very strong position on the role of women in African business, don't you, Sindi?
Yes, absolutely, I do.
So you will talk to us about the Circle of Global Business Women, right?
Yes. Thank you very much. Welcome to all my colleagues that have joined online in South Africa, in Africa, and also the globe. The Circle of Global Business Women was founded on the premises of actually connecting women in the continent, in the globe, and making sure that women gather and come together. And one aspect is that I've been traveling a lot before I actually founded the Circle of Global Business Women. The reason why the Circle is existing is us as African women taking ourselves to global markets. And here we are today. REA-Bridge Africa is a global market, and Business France is a global market. ANIMA Investment International is a global market. And thank you very much to the Embassy of France in South Africa and for supporting us to actually make sure that our dream comes true. And now if you look at our pillars, it's empowerment, leadership, and innovation, and skills development, absolutely. As you've seen that what Zaina has said, that skills development is very critical for women in Africa and also connecting into the globe. But also what is very important that we have identified as the Circle of Global Business Women is when women come together, nations rise. Give something to a woman, it's going to be done. Thank you. The next slide. Now, if you look at the Africa trade opportunities, Africa is a world leader in women entrepreneurship, but we still have that 58% that constitutes the women. And now what we're saying is, how do we actually increase the bar and make sure women take their rightful position in the continent, in regional value chains? Now we're talking about the implementation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which is we are working very closely with the Africa Free Trade Agreement in Africa as the Circle of Global Business Women. And we're humbled and honored to have His Excellency Wamgele Mene as one of our speakers when we launched the Circle on the 15th of August last year. So we are turning a year old. And thank you very much for this presentation to REA-Bridge, that in a year's time, we are really now talking about who is the Circle and where are we going, taking ourselves to global markets in an action-driven strategy. Now, the as we have articulated, access to finance is a problem to women in the continent. But if you look at the challenges that we have, more women are actually in subsistence agriculture. As what Zaina was saying, Zaina actually positioned the challenges of women in agriculture in a very strategic way, where we see a lot of women in the agriculture space playing a critical role in subsistence. But what we're saying is, let us increase that bar so women can be in agribusiness. And I'll be talking about those initiatives as I close my discussion. And also women-led businesses in the continent. They're very important so that we can support the strategy of economic empowerment. And now our strategic programs as the Circle of Global Business Women, the REA-Africa Bridge is a strategic program to really say that let's place women in the center of the economy in the continent at large. And how do we do that? Our training programs that REA-Bridge has actually given us, we are actually working with Nigeria, with Kenya, and also Ghana. So the Circle of Global Business Women Entrepreneur Networks, they are paired with these entrepreneurs so that they can identify opportunities where they can work together. But what is very important and critical, REA-Bridge is placing women at the center of the economy when we're actually talking about the development of women in the African continent. Now, if you look at the presidency of South Africa, has approved 40% of the public procurement where women can actually start benefiting. This is what we're talking about in practical terms. How do we place women in the center of benefiting in the continent? And I know Kenya has done that because Kenya has actually set aside 30% for women and youth. And we would want to see Philippe and Sarah, more countries coming on board, because I was looking at that 60%, and that 60% of saying we need more activities in the continent. And it's because we need to have more countries that are actually buying into this powerful initiative. And also looking at the presidential support or the presidential task team in South Africa. I'm actually a member of that task team where we are engaging with the private sector to make sure that they open up opportunities again for women to participate. And this is a very good model where women can actually, or other countries in the continent can actually participate. Now, we have signed an MOU with the Africa Forum, which is the eminent persons of Africa. I'm actually humbled to sit in this platform and talk about this relationship, which is the former African heads of states and governments, which is the former presidents of Africa, and President Chisano, President Obasanjo, President Mbeki, and all other presidents in the continent. As the Circle of Global Business Women, we'll be working together with the eminent persons, but focusing on silencing the guns in terms of economic empowerment in the region. And how do we make sure that women, each and every single member state, they participate through agribusiness and through agricultural initiatives. Now, when we're looking at a powerful impact on women-led projects in Africa, placing women, these are recommendations now. Gender and trade agreements are critical. This morning, I was invited by the World Bank, the representative of the World Bank in the Southern Africa, my dearest sister, and Mary, and she was actually articulating one of the powerful, research documents they did in partnership with the South African Revenue Services, which is looking at the challenges of trade and also the role of women that they can play in this platform. But what they have discovered is that in the trade agreements themselves, women are not actually in the forefront. So the advice that they're coming up with is to actually make sure that women are given an opportunity to actually be in the trade facilitation, in the discussions, and even the people that are writing those trade policies, they must understand the challenges that women are facing in the continent so that we can talk about placing women in the center of economic development in the continent. Now, if you look at the spin-off, once we place women at the center of the economy, we'll have a lot of investment opportunities. We'll also look at job creation, which is related to these sectors where women are actually working in Africa, culture and heritage promotion, and also looking at the local and regional trading and opportunities that are available for women to participate. SMMEs and corporates and also and development. But also just to close my discussion, last year I was invited to participate in the Africa Ambition, summit in Paris. That was an eye-opener for me, because this is why we are sitting in this platform. I met gentle giants across the world in Paris that were actually looking for partners in the continent. And it is happening, but you should know what you want and how do we actually place women at the I mean, we're partnered with the South African government. In fact, the Circle of Global Business Women, the South African government is participating very strongly to support us in the work that we're doing to take ourselves to the continent, to take ourselves to the world, and actually take women and to make sure women take their rightful positions in the marketplace. We actually partnered with the Gauteng Growth Development Agency, which is one of the we call them SOEs in South Africa, that is responsible for trade, that is responsible for investment opportunities, that is responsible for investment attraction. We did an export awareness training program for women in South Africa that was well attended. And now we can say that we are taking it step by step so that women can understand the ins and outs of trading, so that they'll be known to actually take themselves to the continent and make sure that they trade and through the opportunities of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. I'd like to say thank you very much. I don't want to actually exceed my 10 minutes. I think I've covered the 10 minutes, but I'd like to thank the French government for the support that they've given to the Circle of Global Business Women. Indeed, women are thriving. When we actually started the Circle, we started the Circle during the storm, and the Embassy of France gave us an opportunity to do an entrepreneurship leadership program at Gapes University. 35 women graduated from that program, including myself. That's why I can speak with confidence. That's why the Circle is actually, still working, but still connecting with women in the globe. So skills are very important. A skill can take you far. And also in terms of corporate governance, we need to have the right systems in place. And we are launching the Circle in the African continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Philippe, ton micro est...
Oui, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to thank Sindi, but I would like, Sindi, that you finish your speech. We will let 5 more seconds to finish in French, because you have a very nice French word on the slide.
Oh, merci beaucoup.
Perfect. That's great.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So
that's learn French as well. And thank you to Alliance France and in Johannesburg that are taking me through the lessons.
Thank you, Sindi. That's the beauty of these webinars. We have to move from French to English to French, and that's great.
Yeah.
We actually, so now we will open the discussion. We have a first question from Dalenda Meki. The question is how to support women in the process of skills development from student to entrepreneurship. So I guess this is a question for whoever, Sindi or Jean-Claude or Zaïnatou.
Thank you. Thank you for
Zaïnatou, maybe. Zaïnatou.
All right. Thank you very much for this question. Actually, there is one component of the SWAYN project that I did not highlight because it was more, integrated for men and women. But it is about how do you contribute to the improvement of curricula on agricultural technical vocational education and training called ATVET and entrepreneurship in schools and colleges, vocational centers in Nigeria and hopefully in Africa. The idea here is to bring in the expertise between French colleges, technical schools and colleges in agriculture, and the Nigerian counterparts to design occupational standards, innovative programs for schools. Now, to answer directly that question, how do we support women? Just like we will always do, we have to be intentional about bringing women into these areas of studies. And the way we do it is that we have to reach out to the women and also see the added value in terms of career building and career development for women, and understanding as well that agriculture as a business, as it is moving, I'm talking about agriculture because I'm in the field of agriculture, we can do the same for many other areas of careers. We have to show that women have been entrepreneurs, and women are usually good as managers as well. And so when we bring that confidence in women that they already have what it takes to succeed, if they put their mind to a specific task or a specific career, and making sure as well that at the policy level, we advocate for women to have a seat, then I think that would bring more, that would be a positive outcome to bring to supporting women in the development of their skills in entrepreneurship. Now, it's important to mention as well that we're not talking about lowering the bar or the standards so that women can access programs like maybe STEM programs or agricultural programs or science programs. That's not what we're talking about. We keep the same standard as we request as well for men, because women are very capable of reaching that standard. We just have to push them and let them know that they have the confidence and they have to occupy the space that they have given. That is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about lowering the standard. We're talking about opening up the space and pushing the women in. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good answer. There is no other question in the chat. If you want to ask a question, you can also raise your hand on your electronic hand, if I may, or you post your question in the chat as you wish. Any other question? Well, if you are, while I let you think of your next question to the speakers, I have one actually, maybe to Jean-Claude, but also to the others. Jean-Claude, you talked about what the government does, as implemented in terms of laws and ways, legal ways to make the playing field better for women and to help promote the role of women in the economy or in business, which is of course a very important step. You also mentioned that the roots of these inequalities that we have are also very much cultural. And by the way, it's not only in Africa, of course, in many other parts of the world, starting with Europe and France. But there is a strong cultural background which explains these differences. Do you think and do you see an evolution on that field thanks to the measures taken by the government in your country, for instance, or in other countries, on the cultural perception of the role of women? Is it evolving?
Merci beaucoup de la question. Je pense que
Thank you very much for your question. And I think that the context evolves and evolves quite quickly, quicker than we thought. It is true, it is not sufficient to implement standards and regulations. We also have to change the mindset of people, because as we were saying, these inequalities were not seen as something unjust. It was just natural. And people would wanted to maintain the status quo. Men were really comfortable with that, and certain women think that it is not right to ask the women to be equal to men because it's impossible. It is true, there are some legal tools that we need to implement, but there is an advocacy work which is even more important, and this is done by the civil society to denounce this inequality, this lack of justice, this injustice, and hopefully often violences that are done to women. There are some legal tools that are implemented, but they are not sufficient because we need to work on people's conscience. We need to accompany them and to sustain them and to support them through time. But once the law is in place, we can implement follow-up mechanism to enforce this law. Not only laws, but there are also structures and institutions which have been implemented to sustain and implement this standard, this norm. The Ministry of Jean, and also we have the Gender Monitoring Office, which is a bureau which is independent, and they monitor and follow up the implementation of this gender policy throughout all institutions and structures, being the public, private, and even in the civil society. So everybody is implementing these new policy for equality, complementarity, and gender. We see right now that there are we see that there's nothing special for nothing special to men. Women are really skillful and competent, and when they're given some responsibilities, most of the time they're better than men in those positions. And this increase the trust. And we also have organization of the civil society. They continue to carry on advocacy in this sense. It is true that in the past, women were not enough educated or skilled to compete with men. There were some measure of positive exclusion where women would have more benefits than men. But now these have been implemented also in these new policies. And when women are in a place of responsibility today, we see the difference. Thank you very much, Jean-Claude.
Maybe on a deux questions dans le chat et une question de Sindi.
So we have two questions in the chat and one question for Cindy, from Cindy, sorry. I'd like to propose to move to the last presentation.
Take your question after the last presentation that is coming now. Donc on a parlé du terrain.
So we talked about the field, we talked about the need of for changing structures, but also conscience of people. We need mindset of people. We also talked about micro financing, and we talked about the access of to funding. So to complete this webinar with the question of access to funding, I'd like to ask Seynabou to present Women in Africa, so a mentoring program for the diaspora to help women to find financiers to help them develop projects. Seynabou, I'll leave you the floor. Thank you very much, Sarah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Seynabou, I'm talking to you from Senegal. I'm really happy to join you today. I'll ask you to excuse a little bit my voice because I have a cold. I've been victim of climate change, I believe. In Oman, in Women in Africa, we have been working for now 6 years in this engagement of the place of women in African economies. This is something that we believe in profoundly, and all the speakers that spoke before me have given studies and figures. I think that the question is not to be justified any longer today. We are convinced of the place of women in African economy, and we also know how much these are engaged in this economy. It is quite funny because the initial poll, I was quite surprised in respect to the answer that was given the most. Women in Africa, we are convinced that women already have a place in this economy. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves is the return on their investment in respect to their engagement. Is it enough? And that's why in Women in Africa, we think, this is where in Women in Africa, we think there is a lot of work to do to sustain women in order for their action to be more efficient, to have more impact, and their return on engagement or investment is more pertinent. So we are a platform that sustain women for the economical development of our continent. We are an impact company and a foundation. We are convinced that the women are the backbone of Africa. In every country we work in Africa, we see women in business. That is women that we see early in the morning getting out of the house to go to work. We see them in exchange in the markets. Anyway, more than men. This is figures that we receive from the AFPD. They are able to use 80% of their income for their family and their community. So they are really the engines of their community. And tackling this question of equality and company development, we could save more than $85 billion, because that's what inequality costs in Africa. Basically, 6% of the country's GDP. So how do we work? We are a foundation covering the 54 countries in Africa, and we work with different jobs. We say that giving the necessary resources to women and the resources that they need, that they are pertinent to them, because in the past maybe we made the error of doing you top down, and we understood today that we need to listen to the women in order to propose something that is pertinent to them. Most of the speakers that spoke before me talked a lot about upskilling, skilling, or training. The main job that we have, our métier, is the training in digital, because COVID showed us that we needed to adapt and to evolve and continue to go forward. So training is one of the pillars of our activity. And afterwards, what we do is a lot of communication. Communication is part of our DNA, because we are convinced that giving more visibility to these women, to these success stories, to these role models, we will continue to inspire further generations, because we have a population which is quite young today, and it's composed by more than 50% of women. So we need to continue to inspire these women, to let them understand that they are able, that they can occupy high position. And we, in order to do that, we show them the pioneer, those who would before them break the glass ceiling. And we do that through communication. We create a lot of digital events, debate, exchange, sharing, creating content in order to bring forward this reflection on the place of women in our African economy. And also we do networking. We try to create bridges in between women with different origins, different kind of skills, different roles and responsibility, not only in Africa, throughout the world, because we believe that this gender question exists everywhere, is widespread across the board, is not only an African question. But anyway, there is a global notion and global subject for it, global topic. Women in Africa develops a number of different programs. I will not tell all of them to you because we have several, but maybe 2 or 3 where we do this supporting action. The first one is the banner program, which is the 54 program, because we support 1 woman for each country in the continent. So supporting 54 women each year. And for us, this is a way to create a network of 54 African women each year, entrepreneur with projects and high potential companies. And we create a network in order for them to talk about their opinion, and also to be able to do some networking and working together. And we also support them with some mentoring and training. Mentoring is more and more important in women in Africa, because we realize that women, beyond their hard skills, they need to be supported to develop soft skills, and mentoring has this advantage of giving hard and soft skills at the same time, creating couple of entrepreneurs that have common interests or common needs in respect to a strategy that they have that is similar. So we launched last year with our 54 network this ambitious program, which is the one to mentor not 54 women as we do each year, but 540 women in Africa. So in average 10 women by country. And the task that we've given to each couple is to work on how they can present the company and present them to financiers and investors. So why did we start this process? Because everybody asked us that, because it's quite an ambitious project, even though we are right to do it, is because throughout the years in Women in Africa, in the program that we launched 5 years ago, we received more than 10,000 demands. And by assessing these demands, we realize there's an important problem, because we talked a lot about access to investment, and we do not understand how and why women only had access to 6% of the investment that are proposed by financiers in Africa. So we said to ourselves, for our first important mentoring program, we would like these 540 people to have the tools and the possibility to present their business to business angels or investors. We are working in this first cohort of mentoring, and at the end we will shortlist those who have done the best work and have the highest potential of obtaining funding, and we will organize some pitch days and give them the opportunity to pitch their projects and possibly have some funding. So I just wanted to spotlight this program, but we have a lot of other programs. We teach women coding, we would like to inspire these women to go towards sectors and areas that are normally not thought to be for women. We also work on research with the Cabinet Lamberger, allowing us to publish data on the question of economical development through women on the continent. We also work on hubs and so on and so forth. But on this program, on this support to investment, we are the one on which we focus the most. We put the most of our energy. And I'd like to finish by saying that we launched an extremely ambitious program this year with the Coca-Cola Foundation, allowing us to support 7,000 women in Kenya, Nigeria, Ivory Coast. And so we did a considerable amount of work this last 5 years, and we start today to be able to amplify and to extend our work with important partners, giving us the means to support more and more women each year. And 5 years later, 5 years after we start to have quite a number of success stories. For instance, think about in Madagascar, we have this company, Pure Valea, employing 82% of women. They're working on vanilla and are one of the leaders of the vanilla sector in Madagascar, and they pay 50% more their employees in respect to the rest of the sector of the market. And so you see the multiplying effect sustaining a project like this can have. They will in their turn support every other women in inclusive projects, and they will multiply this success throughout women and throughout the different communities. We also have companies that have quite a nice trajectories. We have companies like Black Mamba in Swaziland, Patria in Senegal, being able to having access to funding. And also we have companies working on fundamental topics like public health, like Viviane in Nigeria, working against fake drugs, and they had a growth of 1,200% in between 2017 and today. I will not cite them all, but that was just to show you that these success stories multiply, and we use them as a multiplying factor to increase the impact of women and to balance women engagement and outcome.
Thanks a lot. So we were speaking about training 300 women who are going to train 1,000. We have some questions in the chat. There is one that is really tangible about initiatives in Cameroon. So women in Africa. I think that women in Africa is in Cameroon. Yes, in 54 countries, actually. So the program, we are 54, is implemented throughout all the countries of the African countries, including the diaspora, if the business has an impact in Africa. So in Africa, in Cameroon as well, we have some activities. The idea is that we always work with new partners in order to have a broad coverage. For example, with the Coca-Cola program, we are going to start with 10 countries. And what I would suggest is to subscribe to our newsletter, because we have lots of programs. In some cases, such programs have focused on one country, but in other cases, all the 54 countries in Africa.
I will ask you two questions at once. Is the Circle of Global Business Women present in Cameroon? And then there is another question in the chat for you. How can the World Bank assist with the farm in the Northeast with the vertical farming?
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, the sector of global business women is represented in Cameroon as the first initial stages, because we are working very closely with the Afrexim Bank as well. Mr. Dr. Gainmore Zanamo, who is responsible for Africa Intertrade. He's the one that is actually connecting the sector of global business women with the African countries. And yesterday we had a very powerful meeting as well with the African Union Development Agency, which is the agency mandated by the African Union to implement projects. We'll be actually strategically partnering with the agribusiness division, where we'll be actually going across the continent, working with women on the ground. And as you know that the African Union theme is building on resilience and nutrition. And what you can do is I'll type in my email address so that you can get hold of me and see how do we connect you with the people that we're working with the women that we're working with in Cameroon. And the second one, thank you very much. That's my president in Switzerland, the president for the sector of global business women that has asked the question. Thank you very much, President Mutlafi Rabai in Switzerland. Yes, indeed, we can actually connect with the World Bank, because the World Bank is actually interested in such projects. Because if you look at how Mary works, Mary is actually interested in working with rural communities and actually looking at capacity building. So we can actually connect with you and see how do we introduce you to the land bank and to the World Bank and introduce you to the project. But in closing, Sarah and Philippe, I think the question that you asked my Rwandan colleague is a very important question, not only in the continental agenda, but in the global agenda. If you look at what President Macron did last year in July, when we're talking about the generation equality, where we came up with, coalitions, where we came up with pledges, and how countries globally can start really talking about what is this equality that we're talking about and how can we achieve it. And I would like to challenge, my colleagues in the continent to say that generation equality is possible. Let us go back to our member states and make sure that all the commitments that were done in Paris under the leadership of President Macron, we still have to keep on those pledges. We still have to keep on those deadlines and make sure that generation equality is alive and possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sindi. Are there other questions in the chat?
Oui.
Sarah, yeah.
Donc, il y a une question de Laetitia Bissot.
There is one question from Cameroon, a CEO, about the resources, financial resources that could be helpful for one company such as the one that he shares or she shares. Anyone would like to take this one, because it was not addressed to someone in particular. So what are the available resources for a company such as his own or her own? Can you please say the question again, repeat the question again? Okay. Once again, the question is, I'm looking for it. What are the financial resources that are available for a company such as my own, an IT company in Cameroon, that could be helpful to me? Well, I am going to give a general reply because I do not have a specific knowledge about Cameroon in terms of tools or funds. But in general, in the Pan-African Union, there are many, many initiatives that give money, give funds. So in most of the cases, companies just need to speak about their projects and ask for funds. I think that this opportunity exists. There are some funds that are available in Cameroon, or there are other programs such as the one that we spoke about. Such programs give the opportunity to have access to funds through forms of support or competitions, and then there are also institutions, banks. I know that it is the most complicated option, but they could also support you. They have some requirements, but banks in Africa could also fulfill this mission. And there are also some funds that are given to banks and with the aim of giving warranties to investments. So what I would suggest is really to look for information about all these initiatives specifically for Cameroon. And another piece of advice is to create a network. Network is absolutely key. It's really important to ask for advice. That is why we need networks. So never forget to do networking, to ask your network, because very often your network would give you a fantastic solution. Thanks a lot for this general but really comprehensive reply. We have a question, Nasira Aga, and then there is another question in the chat. So yes, hello, can you hear me? Nasira Haddad, yes. I wanted to thank you for the topic that you tackled. That I would also like to thank speakers, really high quality speakers. I just wanted to share some thoughts with you. After the pandemic and after the international situation and crisis, how can we give more opportunities to women so that they can really be a key player in social development in their countries, in their ecosystems, but also how can they be a lever to improve relations in Africa? Because this problem is very striking. All reports, study show that when women start be involved in programs, well, their participation gives immediate good results. At the same time, as an observer, I can say that today there is a bit of distance from such programs. That is the case for the World Bank, the European Commission, or different stakeholders, or United Nations agencies. There is this dynamic that provided some forms of support, lots of different tools that have been presented in the framework of Forum Africa. But I think that what is lacking is really the implementation. That is the case for Algeria, for example. The potential of women is just fantastic because women are very educated. So they could really play a fantastic role and help to support the society. And I think that the same holds true for other countries. But we can say that there is a lot of distance. There is a mismatch between what women can offer and what they can really do. And Forum Africa, for example, should be replicated. It should be also integrated and developed further so that women can really have access to other opportunities. And I think that we should use an approach based on the value chain with activities that can really put together, because what we have today is a fragmentation of actions, while if you use the value chain approach, the results will even be better. So how can we make sure that these success stories can really be broadened, developed, and replicated through government programs? Or, for example, there was a program of the French President Macron. Or how is it possible to repeat such or to replicate and duplicate these programs in order to enhance their potential? Thanks a lot, Nasira. Sindi, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think Nasira is raising a very important issue in the continent, because we cannot talk about economic development and not address the social issues and the social ills of women on the ground, because they become the backbone for women to rise and take their rightful position in the marketplace. And that's why, Nasira, we've actually signed an MOU with the former African heads of states, the Africa Forum. And one of the programs to actually go on the ground and actually come up with a capacity building program, where we'll be actually working very closely with the African Union Development Agency, so that we'll be able to actually capacitate women on the ground socially in their communities after they've formed their cooperatives or their projects and communities, and how to actually take them and formalize them, because the critical issue is the informal setup, is what my colleague Zaina was saying from Nigeria, working with women on the ground. But I want to say, we cannot work in isolation. We need to collaborate. I mean, my dearest sister from Senegal, Women in Africa, she is saying that networks are very important. So in this platform, let us identify each other. How can we come together as women to take ourselves in the continent to the next level? And I agree with you, Nasira, all the issues that you have raised, and also one of the powerful programs that you just articulated is actually what President Macron is doing in Africa. You know, President Macron was one of the first global leaders to say reforms in global platforms. How can, the World Bank or the IMF start assisting emerging economies in Africa? And we saw that happening. We saw him flying down to Africa, connecting with African presidents during the pandemic, during COVID, making sure that Africa is alive in the midst of the storm. And such projects must be continued, Philippe and Sarah, to actually make sure that Africans can still live again, can actually identify themselves as who they are in the African continent by being handheld by programs that are coming from Europe. And also one good initiative and powerful initiative is actually the European and the African Union International Conference that was held recently, where Africans and European businesses came together to discuss these challenges and how do we resolve them on the ground. I'm very passionate about this. I can
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sindi. Unfortunately, we have to.
Thanks a lot.
Almost to the conclusion now, since we have still 5 minutes to keep the time slot we had. So what I suggest that we will let each of our speakers take 1 minute possibly to give their final conclusion. And then we will have just a few announcements to do before we switch off. So let's start with Zaïnatou. Maybe your final remark in 1 minute.
All right. Thank you very much, Philippe. And this was a very eye-opening seminar as well for all the work that our colleagues are doing here. And I couldn't agree more with Sindi that it's important that we continue the work of advocating for women's spaces and women development. That work has to happen at the institutional level, top. It has to happen also at the ground level. because the voices of women from all the different spheres of work, of life, have to be represented in this debate. And I think it's also very critical to continue to document the journey of women and understand that, you know, there is a data gap that is there when we're talking about women empowerment and all statistics related to women. As we continue to study and to report on the work that women are doing, we'll soon see that women have always been present in this space. We just need to be more visible, and also we just need to hear them a lot more about the kind of development they want for themselves and for their community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaïnatou. Jean-Claude, quelques remarques de conclusion en 1 minute.
Some closing remarks. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It will not be a minute. I think we cannot talk about putting women at the center of development without talking about a problem, which is what we normally call a non-paid care. The work in the home that take too much of the time to women, and so they do not have time left to generate revenues. This is a question that we should tackle. And also the question that I see in the chat are really important to see how the conflict between the states have an impact on the different economic system. The first thing that they do is to close the borders, and people suffering from these are the people, and normally women. Thank you very much, Claude, for this conclusion. And last but not least, maybe a word from Seynabou. Seynabou, sorry. Thank you very much. No problem. I will be really brief, but I think that the question of the place of women in our continent, in Africa, maybe everywhere in the world, is no longer to be demonstrated, to be justified, is quite self-evident, is something that we have to shape. And it needs to evolve with our evolving world, which becomes a global village today. Today, the world is a small village, and so the place of women has to correspond, to be aligned to this global village today in all aspects of society, finance, religious. So I hope that all our joint actions will lead to this common objective, because I've heard several times that there are too many initiatives, but then other people say that there are not enough because they are tailored on specific mindsets of different women. So we throw a lot of woodlogs in the sea, hoping that everybody finds one to grip onto. And there are many nice and surprising things that we've seen, and I'm really happy I had the opportunity to see all these other initiatives, and I think it will be the good start for a nice collaboration. Thank you very much, and kudos to the champions of Africa. So to conclude, as we said in the beginning, we will propose once again to vote on the same question you had in the initial poll to this webinar. So we hope to see some evolution in the vision you have of the place of women in the African economy. Whilst you reply to the poll, I'd like to give you a personal thought. I moderated a seminar some time ago, and comparing in Europe, there were a lot of more men startups, whilst in Lebanon the proportion was the contrary, was that we had a lot more women. One of the explanation is that in Europe, women were less highlighted because of the welfare state, and in the Middle East, the explanation for this was that when we create a company, there is always a risk of a bad outcome, and that women were less scared of a failure than men. I just given you this thought that was highlighted for the seminar, and now let's get to the outcome of the poll. You still have a minute to vote. Just a housekeeping announcement for the webinars to come. We have the next one, 19th of April, is a webinar of the Next Society program, so ANIMA program on e-commerce. We have our last webinar on the export markets in Nigeria in May for REA Africa. In May, we also have a new seminar of the Next Society on the health tech. And finally, on the 12th of May 2022, a seminar of Meet Africa on the diaspora mobilization, and the 16th of June 2022, our last REA-Bridge webinar on supporting social and solidarity economy. Let's move to the results of the poll. Clearly, it was completely different from since the beginning of the webinar, because we started with 32% of people thinking that women were present, but we still have some improvements to do, and 60% thinking that they were not present enough in development projects. And now we have exactly the opposite, 67% thinking that they are present, but still we need to improve things, and 29% thinking that they are not represented enough and they should be more. So thank you very much to all our speakers, because apparently you were able to convince people, highlighting all these initiatives and highlighting the important role, which has to become even more important, of women in the economical development and creation of companies and entrepreneurship. This debate is not finished here, of course. ANIMA will continue to do its job. There was a proposal for a platform to continue to exchange on these different projects. Of course, we already have the REA platform to continue to exchange on our experience. Do not hesitate to continue to share, and we are available to continue the debate. Thank you very much to all of you, and see you soon.